This time around, we're going to take a look at just one way to try and create a background for something where you want to maybe highlight a product. You don't really have anything. Well, you'll see as we do it. As always, we're going to start off by creating a pattern, and we want this pattern to be a quarter of an inch, quarter of an inch by quarter of an inch. Okay. I'll zoom that up a little bit so we can see what we're doing. And I'm going to create a new layer. You don't see my layers palette at the moment. All I did was click on the new layer button, and I'm going to use the shortcut for fill, Shift Delete or Shift Backspace, and fill it. Actually 50% gray is just fine. Now might as well bring in my layers palette so you can see what I'm doing here. I'm just going to go and add a bevel and emboss, and I have to make it pretty small because this is a pretty small pattern. So maybe just a little bit of softening, just a hair. That looks pretty good, like that. Click OK. Select all, and from the Edit menu, define pattern. And we're going to call it something so we can hopefully find it again. And once we've done that, we could close this. Now, obviously, you could, if you wanted to, you could save it to come back and work with it later to make other patterns. But for now, that's all I'm going to do. I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to use the same fill command, but this time go to pattern. And here's the different ones. I made one that previously that was a light blue. This one I'm going to go with a gray. Click OK. And there's our little sort of tile pattern. I'm going to move the layers palette slightly off the screen. Doesn't really matter if you don't see the whole thing for right this moment. And I'm going to make a selection right on the border of these row of tiles. Probably I'm selecting roughly a third or so. Now obviously this will depend on what you want to do. Then I'm going to press Command or Control J, which will duplicate just that. Now, for this purpose, I'm going to really move this out of the way because we need a bit more room here. Because at this point, I have just this. If I hide the other layer, see, I have just that on layer by itself. I'm going to use Free Transform and then make this window much bigger because I want to hold down Command Option Shift or Control Alt Shift and basically drag these handles really far out to the side. It's going to look kind of distorted on the screen, but that's okay. When I hit Enter, it nicely scale. So it's going to look a little out of focus, but that's okay based on what we're doing here. Okay. Now, as an optional step, this is not necessary, but I could add a new layer and just kind of paint a darker line where the joint is. I'm not going to bother in this case, but you could do that if you really wanted to. Let's get this back to size here. Okay. So what can we do from here on? Well, a number of things. First of all, let's take the original layer, and we're going to add a gradient overlay as a layer style, which allows us to play a little bit. This is a gradient that's going from black to white. I can change the blend mode to, for example, multiply, or maybe overlay. I like overlay, and I can play with the angle, trying to create kind of a lighting effect, and maybe the opacity is a little high. And you see as I'm doing this on the fly, you can sort of see the results on the side. And I want the same effect on the other layer, so I'm going to Option or Alt drag it, and now I get kind of a nice contrast. So it almost looks like maybe a kitchen counter. I don't know what exactly it is, but that's not the point. The point is to see what we can do with this. So at this point, that's the basic idea, is to create the pattern, and then by distorting and playing around with some of the lighting effects, you can do some pretty interesting things. Now just to show you a finished result, here's one that I did basically the same idea with blue tiles, and then basically just stuck a stock photo of a wine bottle here, and then made various copies. So I made a little reflection, made a couple of cast shadows, and so on. So it's really just an idea to get you started with something that you can use as a background. Now what you put in there, of course, is up to you, and you can come up with all sorts of interesting ideas. I'm sure you can. Now, I know what you're thinking. At this point, I'm going to make my head float in the middle of space, but that would be too obvious because, you know me, I'm not about anything, well, obvious, am I? Well, okay, I am. I'm Dave Cross. We'll see you next time.